Police, step away from the desk. Hands where I can see them now.
Please, there is a mistake. I have worked at this.
Diane Renee Caldwell operated without oversight for over 8 months as a branch operations manager in Springfield, Oregon. $40,000 had already moved through a dead man's account before a single person outside this building thought to look.
Aggravated theft and identity theft. $87,000 from a deceased member's account.
I process account maintenance every single day.
Please, I have a family.
11 transfers. 1 dead man's account. $87,400, drained over 3 quiet months by the one employee at the branch with the authority to make a death disappear from the system. By the time auditors from the merging institution opened the file, every keystroke had a name, a date, and a login. Within 90 days, the 22-year branch operations manager standing in this footage would be in handcuffs, pleading guilty in Lane County Circuit Court, and barred for life from ever touching another federally insured account. Quick question. When was the last time you actually thought about who has the authority to change the address on your accounts? Most people never do in their entire lives. Drop a comment if this is the first time you've considered it, and subscribe before we go any further. We cover the people you trust most every single week, and the stories never get easier. Diane Renee Caldwell was born in March of 1971 in Cottage Grove, Oregon, a former lumber town tucked into the southern end of the Willamette Valley, 20 miles below Eugene. Her father, Raymond, worked the planer line at the Weyerhuser Mill on River Road, a job he held for 31 years before the mill closed in the late 1990s. Her mother, Patricia, kept the books for a feed and tack store on Main Street and ran the household. Diane was the younger of 2 children. Her older brother, Curtis, went into the trades and eventually moved to Roseburg to weld for a fabrication shop. The Caldwell house sat on a quiet street of single-story ranches built for mill families. A brown shake roof, a carport, a chain-link fence around a backyard with a single apple tree. Patricia kept a chore chart on the side of the refrigerator, color-coded with felt-tip pens, and Diane was the daughter who took it seriously. Teachers at Harrison Elementary wrote on her report cards that she was, quote, exceptionally neat, end quote, the kind of student who, quote, asks if the lines have to be perfectly straight, end quote, and, quote, a quiet, careful child, end quote. She was the kind of kid who alphabetized her own bookshelves and counted the change in her piggy bank into stacks of 10. She graduated from Cottage Grove High School in 1989. She did not go away to school. Instead, she enrolled at Lane Community College in Eugene and earned an associate degree in business administration, riding the city bus up Highway 99 4 mornings a week with a thermos of coffee and a trapper-keeper of class notes. She paid her own tuition with a part-time job answering phones at a State Farm office on Coburg Road, $8.10 an hour, after-school hours that stretched into full days the summer she turned 20. In 1994, at 23, she married Kevin Caldwell, a journeyman electrician she had met at a friend's wedding in Mackenzie Bridge. They bought a starter house in the Thurston neighborhood of Springfield with help from Kevin's parents and a 30-year mortgage from a small thrift on Mohawk Boulevard. Their daughter, Lindsay, was born in 1997. Their son, Tyler, followed in 2000. Family photographs from those years show a tidy, split level with a planter box of marigolds by the front step, a station wagon, a swing set in the backyard, and a woman who did not appear in any photograph to have a single hair out of place. Diane Caldwell applied for a teller position at Cascade Pioneer Credit Union in April of 2003. She was 32 years old, returning to full-time work after 7 years at home with the children. Cascade Pioneer was, even then, an institution with deep roots in the valley. It had been chartered in 1953 to serve workers at the Weyerhaeuser Mills, the timber crews, and the state highway employees, and over the next half-century, it grew into a regional credit union serving roughly 90,000 members from Albany down to Cottage Grove. Caldwell was hired at $11.40 an hour and assigned to the Gateway branch on Olympic Street, the larger of the two Springfield side locations. Her supervisor in those first months was a senior teller named Marlene Dixon, a 28-year veteran who had trained dozens of new hires. Dixon's notes from Caldwell's first quarterly review described her as, quote, meticulous to a fault, end quote, with, quote, a clean drawer at the end of every shift, end quote, and, quote, the kind of new teller who actually reads the policy binder, end quote. Caldwell did not miss work. She did not balance short. She handled the elderly members at her window with what Dixon called, quote, patient, unhurried attention, end quote. Pulling up their savings ledgers, reading aloud the amounts, walking them through their certificate of deposit maturities, and the difference between the share savings rate and the money market rate. By 2006, she had been promoted to senior teller. Her review that year said she, quote, demonstrated strong judgment under pressure, end quote, handled escalations, quote, with the composure of a much more experienced staff member, end quote, and was, quote, the obvious bench candidate for the next assistant manager opening, end quote. In 2009, when the Gateway branch's assistant manager retired after 26 years, Caldwell was promoted into the role. Her salary moved to $48,500. She began closing the branch on weeknights, balancing the vault, handling the daily settlement, and overseeing 4 tellers. In 2016, the branch operations manager position came open following an internal transfer. There were 4 internal candidates. Caldwell was the unanimous choice of the regional management team. Her starting salary in the new role was $72,000 plus an annual bonus tied to branch performance metrics. The promotion came with something far more valuable than the salary bump. It came with authority. As branch operations manager, she sat across the floor from the tellers in a glassed-in office with her name on a brass plaque outside the door. She closed the branch. She opened the branch. She approved overrides. She handled the kinds of accounts that ordinary tellers were not permitted to touch. In 2018, Cascade Pioneer named her to its Internal Fraud Review Committee, an institution-wide panel of 7 employees who met monthly at the Salem headquarters to evaluate suspicious activity reports, review branch-level discrepancies, and recommend disciplinary action when staff were caught skimming. Caldwell was the only branch manager on the panel. Her name appeared on the masthead of the institution's internal compliance newsletter for 3 consecutive years. She was, by any honest measure, one of the most trusted, long-tenured employees in the entire 90,000-member organization. Cascade Pioneer Credit Union was by 2024 a $1.6 billion institution with 12 branches across the Willamette Valley and roughly 90,000 members. Credit unions are not banks. They are member-owned, not-for-profit financial cooperatives governed by a volunteer board elected from the membership and regulated at the federal level by the National Credit Union Administration. The branding of a credit union is built on a single word: trust. The members are the owners. The staff are stewards. The accounts of the dead in the institution's own training material are to be handled with, quote, dignity, discretion, and complete transparency to the estate, end quote. In practice, that handling routed across a single desk. When a death notice arrived at Cascade Pioneer, by mail, by fax, by phone call from a funeral home, by walk-in family member with a death certificate, it was delivered to the branch operations manager at the branch where the deceased member held the primary relationship. At the Gateway branch, that was Diane Caldwell. The protocol, in writing, was unambiguous. Within 24 hours of receiving a death notification, the manager was required to log the death in the core banking system, flag the account with a deceased member code, freeze all outgoing transactions, and route a settlement letter to the named beneficiary or executor of the estate. If no beneficiary was on file, the file went to a queue for legal review and eventually, after the statutory dormancy period, to the Oregon Department of State Lands for esquipement. The system that recorded all of this was a piece of software called Symmetra Epicys, a core banking platform used by thousands of credit unions across the United States. Epicys does one thing extraordinarily well. It logs everything, every login, every screen viewed, every transaction initiated, approved, reversed, or canceled, every address change, every statement suppression flag, every internal transfer between member accounts. Each action is stamped with an employee user ID, a workstation identifier, and a server timestamp accurate to the millisecond. The log cannot be deleted by a branch employee. It cannot be edited. It is written to a separate audit table that is replicated nightly to a backup server at the credit union's data center in Salem. The branch operations manager was the only employee at the Gateway branch with the system permission set to initiate the deceased member workflow. She was also the only employee with permission to change the mailing address on a closed relative account. She was the only employee with permission to suppress statements. She was the only employee with permission to approve sub-$10,000 internal transfers without a second employee approval click. Her credentials sat at the apex of the branch's permission hierarchy. Below her, every teller. Above her, only a regional manager in an office 60 miles up Interstate 5 in Salem. The $10,000 threshold mattered. Federal law required Cascade Pioneer to file a currency transaction report on any cash movement at or above $10,000. And the institution's internal policies layered on top of that an automated suspicious activity flag for any structured pattern of sub-threshold transfers. The flag, however, applied to external wire activity and to cash deposits. Internal transfers between member accounts within the credit union, a savings account to a checking account, for example, did not trigger the same automated review unless they crossed the $10,000 line in a single transaction. Caldwell knew that. She had helped write the branch-level desk procedure that documented it. She had, in fact, trained 2 of her tellers on the language of the procedure during the spring of 2023. The opportunity arrived on Caldwell's desk on the morning of June 4th, 2024, in the form of a beige interoffice envelope containing a single document. The document was a copy of a certified death certificate for Harold Walter Pruitt, age 81, of Springfield, Oregon. Cause of death listed as congestive heart failure. Date of death, May 22nd, 2024. The certificate had been delivered to the branch by Major Family Funeral Home on Pioneer Parkway, the same funeral home that handled most of the older members in the Thurston neighborhood. Harold Pruitt had opened his first share account at what was then Cascade Pioneer's predecessor, Lane Timber Workers Federal Credit Union, in 1984. He had been a member for 40 years. He had worked 38 of those years as a yard foreman at the Springfield Forest Products Mill on Glenwood. His wife, Dorothy, had died of cancer in 2012. The Pruitts had never had children. On the membership file, the box for primary beneficiary read, "None," never updated, never filled in, never corrected. The box for joint account holder, after Dorothy's death, was likewise empty. There was no listed next of kin, no power of attorney, no estate attorney on record. Harold Pruitt had lived alone for 12 years in a one-story house on G Street, paying his property taxes on time and dropping a Christmas card with two $10 bills inside into a teller's window every December. At the time of his death, his accounts at Cascade Pioneer contained the following: a primary share account with a balance of $4,211, a savings account with a balance of $57,890, two share certificate accounts, one 24-month CD with a balance of $21,400, and one 12-month CD with a balance of $13,700. Total relationship value, approximately $97,000. The savings of a yard foreman's working life. Caldwell did not flag the account. She slid the death certificate into a manila folder, placed the folder into the bottom drawer of her credenza behind a stack of training binders, and locked the drawer. 11 days later, on June 15th, she logged into Epices at 8:47 in the morning, before the branch opened, and pulled up Harold Pruitt's account. She navigated to the address maintenance screen. She changed the mailing address from 1623 G Street, Springfield, to Post Office, Box 4817, Springfield, Oregon, 97477. The P.O. box had been rented in her own name 3 days earlier at the Springfield, Maine post office on Pioneer Parkway. She had paid the annual rental fee, $96, in cash. She had given a driver's license, signed a rental agreement, and walked out with a small brass key on a paper tag. After the address change, she navigated to the statement preferences screen and selected, in sequence, the Suppress Paper Statement option, the Suppress Electronic Statement option, and the Do Not Mail Tax Documents flag. Each click was logged. Each click bore her user ID. She did not know that the audit trail was indelible. Or she did know it and believed, accurately, that no one would ever read the log unless someone went looking, and no one ever went looking. The branch operations manager was the person whose job it was to go looking. The transfers began on July 1st, 2024. At 9:11 a.m., she initiated an internal transfer of $7,800 from Pruitt's savings account to a checking account held at Cascade Pioneer in the name of Lorelei A. Pulver of Roseburg, Oregon. Lorelei Pulver was Caldwell's older sister, the wife of Curtis Caldwell from the welding shop. Lorelei's account had been opened in 2019 during a brief period when she lived in Eugene. It had stayed open after she moved south, a checking account she used for almost nothing, with a near-zero average balance and a single direct deposit from a part-time bookkeeping job that had ended in 2021. 3 days later, on July 4th, while the rest of the country watched fireworks, the $7,800 moved from Lorelei Pulver's account to Diane Caldwell's personal checking account. An internal transfer initiated by Caldwell from a branch workstation at 6:41 in the evening, an hour after the branch had closed for the holiday weekend. The lights were off in the lobby. The vault was sealed. Caldwell was alone in her glassed-in office. The Epices server in Salem logged the transfer in the same dispassionate way it logged a member's $20 deposit at a drive-up window. That was the pattern. 11 transfers in total across July, August, September, and October. The amounts varied: 9,400, 7,200, 8,800, 9,600, 6,500. Each transfer originated from one of Pruitt's accounts. First the savings, then the redeemed certificates as they matured under maintained as active terms, and moved into Lorelei Pulver's checking account. 2 to 4 days later, a second transfer of the same amount moved from Lorelei's account into Caldwell's personal checking. Lorelei's account never accrued a net balance. It was a pass-through, a way station. For each transfer, Caldwell completed an internal transfer slip, Cascade Pioneer's standard pink and white duplicate form, and forged Harold Pruitt's signature on the member authorization line. She had studied his verified signature card from 2003. She had practiced the loops of the H and the P and the trailing flourish below the last T on scratch paper in her glassed-in office. Her forgeries were not perfect, but she filed the slips in the branch's retention drawer beside thousands of legitimate slips from other members, where they would not, she believed, ever be examined. The funds went to specific places. She paid down $22,000 on the home equity line of credit she and Kevin had taken out against the Thurston house in 2019. She paid off approximately $14,000 in revolving credit card balances spread across 3 cards: a Capital One, a Discover, and a Cascade Pioneer-issued Visa, which carried a balance she had been quietly carrying for nearly 5 years. She wrote a check for $9,300 to a travel agency on Coburg Road to finance a family vacation to Maui that the 4 Caldwells took during the second week of October, 2024. 8 nights at a Wiley hotel, snorkeling at Molokini, a luau with Mai Tais, a sunset catamaran cruise off the Lahaina coast. The remaining funds went to general household spending and to a new washer and dryer set she had been quietly wanting since the spring. Harold Pruitt's accounts dwindled. His savings balance fell from $57,000 to $31,000 to $14,000 to under $3,000. His certificates of deposit matured and rolled over under the maintained as active treatment Caldwell had quietly applied, and then were drained on the next transfer. The P.O. box on Pioneer Parkway received the statements that confirmed the bleed. Caldwell opened them, read them, and shredded them in the home shredder in the finished basement of the Thurston house, the shredder humming for an hour at a time on Sunday afternoons. By the end of October, $87,400 had moved out of a dead man's account and into the financial life of the woman the credit union had trusted for 22 years to handle the accounts of the dead with dignity. In early November of 2024, Cascade Pioneer Credit Union's board of directors announced what the membership had been hearing rumors about for months. The institution had entered a formal merger agreement with Pacific Crest Credit Union, a larger and better capitalized cooperative headquartered in Portland. Under the agreement, Pacific Crest would absorb Cascade Pioneer's 90,000 members, its 12 branches, its loan portfolio, and its deposit liabilities. The combined institution would have nearly 400,000 members and just under $9 billion in assets. The merger was scheduled to close in the second quarter of 2025. For the staff at the Gateway branch, the announcement was a non-event. Diane Caldwell sent a calm email to her tellers, reminding them that mergers in the credit union industry routinely preserved branch staffing, that no layoffs had been announced, and that all member-facing operations would continue as normal. She held her regular Monday morning huddle the following week and walked the team through the timeline. She used the word stability 4 times. She did not mention, because she did not know in any specific way, what a pre-merger due diligence audit actually entailed. What it entailed was simple and devastating. Pacific Crest's internal audit team, working under contract with a Portland forensic accounting firm named Bremer Caswell Associates, ran a system-wide reconciliation against Cascade Pioneer's Epices Corp. The reconciliation pulled every account in the institution flagged as dormant, deceased, or otherwise non-current, and cross-referenced the membership status field against the Oregon Center for Health Statistics Death Index, the Social Security Administration's Death Master File, and the institution's own internal death notification log. Any account belonging to a member who was confirmed deceased but not coded as such in Epices was tagged for manual review. It was a routine procedure. It was the kind of audit that had never been run against Cascade Pioneer's books in any previous year, because Cascade Pioneer had never been acquired in any previous year. The Pruitt account tagged on December 19th, 2024. The flag was unambiguous. Harold W. Pruitt, member since 1984. Confirmed deceased per state vital records data, May 22, 2024. Account status in Epices, active. Statement preferences, suppressed. Mailing address, a P.O. box on Pioneer Parkway, with no associated next of kin contact. Last transaction, October 28, 2024, an outgoing internal transfer of $7,100. Total transfer volume over the preceding 4 months, $87,400. 11 sequential outgoing transfers, all sub-threshold, all to the same receiving account, all initiated by the same employee login. The senior auditor at Bremer Caswell, a forensic accountant named Jacqueline Huang, did not raise the matter with Cascade Pioneer's branch staff. She raised it with Cascade Pioneer's chief compliance officer at the Salem headquarters. He, in turn, contacted the institution's outside legal counsel, who within 48 hours had drafted a memorandum recommending that the matter be referred to the Springfield Police Department's Financial Crimes Unit and, in parallel, to the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Oregon for review under the Federal Credit Union Embezzlement Statute, Title 18, United States Code, Section 657. The referral was filed on January 8, 2025. Diane Caldwell, at that point, was midway through her annual review cycle with regional management. She had received a 4 out of 4 overall performance rating and a written commendation for, quote, exceptional stewardship of the Gateway branch during the merger announcement period, end quote. She had no idea any of this was happening. Her calendar for the week of February 3rd showed a Tuesday morning meeting with a member couple about a refinance, a Wednesday huddle with her tellers, and a Thursday lunch with a regional manager to discuss the integration timeline. Springfield Police Department Detective Aaron Velasquez was assigned the case on January 10th, 2025. He was a 14-year veteran of the department's Financial Crimes Unit, a former IRS-CI agent who had transitioned to local law enforcement when his family moved back to Oregon to be closer to his wife's parents. He had worked credit union embezzlement cases before. They were, he later told prosecutors, the cleanest cases in the unit's caseload, because the records were always there. Every keystroke, every login, every transfer attributable to a single user ID. Velasquez issued a formal records request to Cascade Pioneer on January 14th. The credit union, eager to cooperate and acutely aware of the merger timeline, produced everything within 72 hours. The Epices audit trail for Harold Pruitt's account ran to 241 pages of printed log entries spanning June 1st through November 18th, 2024. Every entry bore the same 5-character employee user ID, DCALD. Every entry bore the same workstation identifier, Gateway 04, the workstation in Caldwell's glassed-in office. Every entry bore a server timestamp matching the calendar shifts she had personally worked. The address change on June 15th at 8:47 a.m. Decalled Gateway 04. The statement suppression flags at 8:51 a.m. that same morning. Decaled Gateway 04. Each of the 11 internal transfers, time-stamped to the second. Decaled Gateway 04. The forensic accountants at Bremer Caswell had already produced a corresponding chart showing the funds path, from Pruitt's savings to Lorelei Pulver's checking, from Pulver's checking to Diane Caldwell's checking. 11 sequential pairs. The path was so clean that, as one prosecutor later put it, a first-year accounting student could have followed it with a pencil and a ruler. Velasquez served a subpoena on the Springfield, Maine post office for the rental records on P.O. Box 4817. The records came back within a week, rented June 12, 2024, to Diane R. Caldwell, paid in cash, driver's license number recorded, signature on file. He requested a forensic document examination of the 11 internal transfer slips bearing Harold Pruitt's purported signature. The state's questioned documents examiner, a 26-year veteran named Carla Friesen, compared the slips against Pruitt's verified signature card from 2003 and against a dozen other authenticated signatures from old loan documents in the credit union's archive. Her report ran to 41 pages. Her conclusion was that all 11 signatures were, quote, highly probable forgeries demonstrating consistent characteristics traceable to a single hand, other than that of Harold W. Pruitt, end quote. Velasquez also pulled Caldwell's personal financial records under a separate subpoena. He found the home equity line paydown of $22,000 recorded on July 19th. He found the credit card payoffs totaling roughly $14,000 spread across 3 accounts. He found the $9,300 travel agency check made out to Pacific Horizons Travel and dated September 15th. And he found a long string of point-of-sale charges from a Wiley Hotel and a Lahaina restaurant during the second week of October that, when laid against the transfer dates from Pruitt's accounts, formed a parallel timeline so neat it looked drafted. Lorelei Pulver, when interviewed at her home in Roseburg on January 28th, told the detective that her sister had asked her in late June whether she could, quote, run a few business-related transfers, end quote, through Lorelei's account because Diane was, quote, between credit lines and didn't want to mix it with the household money, end quote. Lorelei said she had not asked questions. She had had a falling out with Diane years earlier over their mother's estate, and they had only recently begun speaking again, and she had wanted to keep the peace. She had not known about Harold Pruitt. She had not known about the address change, or the suppressed statements, or the forged slips. When Velasquez explained the source of the money, she put her hands over her face at the kitchen table and did not speak for nearly a minute. The arrest happened on Tuesday, February 4th, 2025, at 10:14 in the morning. Velasquez and a second detective named Maria Pham, accompanied by 2 uniformed Springfield officers, walked into the lobby of the Gateway branch on Olympic Street. The lobby was almost empty. A retired Weyerhaeuser employee was at the second teller window depositing a check. A young mother with a stroller was waiting at the new accounts desk. Caldwell was at her own desk in the glassed-in office. She was wearing a navy cardigan over a white blouse, dark slacks, a small gold cross at her neck, and a pair of reading glasses pushed up on her head. There was a half-finished cup of coffee on the corner of her desk. Velasquez tapped on the glass door and opened it. He introduced himself, showed his badge, and asked her to step out into the back office. She stood up slowly. She did not look surprised. She closed her laptop, picked up her cardigan from the back of the chair, and followed him without a word. In the back office, a small windowless room with a coffee maker, a microwave, and a bulletin board of credit union compliance posters. Pham read her the Oregon version of her rights and informed her of the warrant. Velasquez laid out the charges in plain language: aggravated theft, aggravated identity theft, multiple counts of forgery, federal embezzlement review pending. He did not raise his voice. He did not put the cuffs on her yet. Caldwell's first words were quiet. "I'd like to understand what specifically you think I did." "Ma'am, we have the EPIC's logs. Every entry, every transfer, the address change, the statement suppression. We have the post office rental in your name. We have the signature comparison from the state's document examiner. We have your sister's statement." "My sister?" "Lorelei Pulver. She told us about the conversation in June, about the transfers through her account." There was a long pause. Caldwell's eyes moved across the back office wall, as if she were reading something written there. She looked at the compliance poster about reporting suspicious activity. She looked at the schedule of upcoming staff birthdays taped beside it. She looked back at Velasquez. "You don't understand what it's like to be the person who closes the dead members' accounts for 22 years. You don't understand how many of them have no one. He had no one. The state was going to take it." "Ma'am, the state taking it is not the same thing as you taking it." "I am not making excuses. I want a lawyer." She did not speak again. Pham cuffed her in the back office, out of view of the lobby, and walked her out the rear door of the branch to a marked unit, waiting in the staff parking lot. The retired Weyerhaeuser employee at the teller window finished his deposit and walked back out into the February cold without noticing anything had happened. "We're heading into the courtroom now. Before we do, if this case has kept your attention this far, that's because the story deserved to be told properly. Subscribe if you want to see how the system actually handles the people it trusted most. We cover one of these every single week, and the next case in your recommended feed is worse. Diane Caldwell was booked into the Lane County Jail on 8th Avenue in downtown Eugene at 12:06 p.m. on February 4th. She was arraigned the following morning before Lane County Circuit Court Judge Eleanor Birch. Bail was set at $50,000, and her husband, Kevin, posted 10% through a bondsman by the end of the day. She walked out of the courthouse that afternoon in the same navy cardigan, accompanied by her defense attorney, a former Lane County Deputy District Attorney named Beth Ann Holloway, who had crossed to the defense bar 15 years earlier and built a small but respected practice handling white-collar cases in the Eugene-Springfield corridor. The Lane County Grand Jury returned an indictment on March 3, 2025. The charges were stark in their precision. 1 count of first-degree aggravated theft under Oregon Revised Statutes, Section 164.057, a Class B felony covering thefts of property valued at or above $10,000 from a vulnerable victim. 1 count of aggravated identity theft under Oregon Revised Statutes, Section 165.803, also a Class B felony, predicated on Caldwell's use of Harold Pruitt's name, signature, and account number to effect the transfers. 11 counts of first-degree forgery under Oregon Revised Statutes, Section 165.013, 1 count for each of the forged transfer slips. The Lane County District Attorney's Office had also filed a notice of parallel federal review, and the United States Attorney's Office had indicated that a federal embezzlement charge under Title 18, United States Code, Section 657, would follow if no plea was reached by the summer. Holloway and the Lane County Deputy District Attorney handling the case, a prosecutor named Renata Ung, spent the spring in plea negotiations. Holloway's leverage was thin. The Eppices logs were not contestable. The forensic document examination was not contestable. The sister's statement was not contestable. The funds path was not contestable. What Holloway could offer was a guilty plea, full restitution backed by a lien on the Thurston house, and a written allocution. What Ung wanted was prison time and a permanent industry bar. On August 19, 2025, Diane Caldwell stood before Judge Birch in Courtroom 3 of the Lane County Justice Center and pleaded guilty to 1 count of aggravated theft, 1 count of aggravated identity theft, and 4 of the 11 forgery counts. The remaining 7 forgery counts were dismissed under the agreement. The federal embezzlement referral was administratively closed. Sentencing was set for the same hearing. Ng read into the record a statement on behalf of the only person who could be said, in any meaningful way, to have spoken for Harold Pruitt, a second cousin in Coos Bay named Roland Pruitt, who had been located during the probate review and who had not seen Harold in person in over 30 years. The statement was 3 paragraphs long. The final sentence read, quote, "My cousin worked the mill yard for 38 years. He saved every dollar he could. He trusted that credit union because his father had trusted it before him. And the person his trust ran through took everything he had left and bought herself a vacation." End quote. Judge Birch took the bench's customary pause before pronouncing sentence. Her statement ran to nearly 3 minutes. Ms. Caldwell, what makes this case different from the ordinary embezzlement that comes through this courtroom is not the dollar amount. The dollar amount is, in fact, on the lower end of cases I see in any given year. What makes it different is the choice. You did not steal from a member who might notice. You chose a man who had been buried 2 weeks before, whose accounts you held in trust precisely because the institution believed you would handle the affairs of the dead with care. You did not steal from someone with a voice. You stole from a silence. And you did it from the very desk the institution placed you at, because they believed you were the steadiest, most careful person in that branch. The court does not accept the framing that the funds were going to escate to the state anyway. The state is not a justification. The court imposes the sentence: 30 months in the custody of the Oregon Department of Corrections, restitution in the full amount of $87,400, joint and several with any future civil judgment, 36 months of post-prison supervision, and the court joins in the federal administrative recommendation that you be permanently barred under Title 12, United States Code, Section 1786, Paragraph G, from any employment or affiliation with any federally insured financial institution for the remainder of your natural life. The defendant is remanded. Caldwell was transferred from the Lane County Jail to Coffee Creek Correctional Facility in Wilsonville, Oregon, the state's only women's prison, on August 22, 2025. She was assigned to general population in the minimum security unit. she was given a release date of February of 2028, eligible for earned time credits that could reduce her actual time served by up to 20%. The home in Thurston was placed on the market in September. The proceeds, after the mortgage and the home equity line, went to the restitution account. Kevin Caldwell filed for legal separation in October. The daughter, Lindsay, now 28 and living in Beaverton, declined to comment when reached by a reporter from the Eugene Register-Guard. The son, Tyler, 25, declined as well. The Pruitt accounts were closed by the credit union in September of 2025. The recovered restitution funds, less administrative deductions, were ultimately escheated to the Oregon Department of State Lands, where Harold Pruitt's life savings would have gone in the first place had the death notice that crossed Diane Caldwell's desk in June of 2024 been handled the way she had handled every other one for 22 years. The Cascade Pioneer Pacific Crest merger closed on schedule in June. As a condition of the integration, the combined institution rewrote its deceased member workflow to require a two-person sign-off on every flagged death notification, an automated cross-check against the Social Security Death Master file at the moment of death notice entry, and a quarterly internal audit of all sub-threshold transfer activity within the first 90 days of any flagged dormant account. The reforms are now standard at every branch in the new institution. Compliance staff refer to the entire package in internal training materials as the Pruitt Protocol. Harold Pruitt was buried on May 29, 2024, at Lane Memorial Gardens in Eugene, in a plot beside his wife Dorothy. There were 9 people at the graveside service. None of them knew that, by the time the headstone was set, the address on his accounts had already been changed to a P.O. box he had never opened, and that a woman he had passed in the lobby for 40 years was already at her desk practicing his signature on a piece of scratch paper. This case was quiet, but the case on the right-hand side is louder, uglier, and harder to look away from. Click it now.